Men, welcome to the most important podcast that you'll hear in a long time. It's the Men's Leadership Community Podcast, and it starts now.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Andy is spending time with his boy. And so I'm going to be your host today. I'm going to be running the show, and hopefully, it's going to be a good experience for all of us. And at the end of the day, I believe we're all going to be better and a little bit wiser and a little bit better looking. So, which some of us need all the help we can get in that department. So, how's everybody doing? Anybody have any praise reports or anything praiseworthy? I think I'd like to hear something, kind of get everybody started on a good note.
Hey, Obie, this is Chris. I'd like to
Mhm.
ask for prayers. I'm leaving on a mission trip Sunday morning to go to Cuba. We're doing a baseball clinic there.
Oh, snap.
And last year we had 150 kids. This year they're expecting 300 or more. So just praising God that we're finding success there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cuba it is, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, that sounds like a great opportunity. And so yeah, we'll all be praying for you. That is that's that's great. Who else has something real quick?
Quick praise. My mom was really generous and she took us on a trip to the Ark and the Creation Museum out in Kentucky, Ohio. And it was a huge blessing, a trip. We missed our flight going out there, and luckily we were able to find something else, and everything seemed to go off without a hitch. But it is a huge praise. I mean, it's such a great experience, and I highly recommend it.
Yes, that's on our bucket list. So that's going
It's
to be
amazing.
amazing.
It's
All
amazing.
right.
Obie,
Well, yeah.
Obie, I give you one more, couple. My kids are healthy and fantastic, and I'm loving life with them. And my younger brother Matt joined the call. I think he was on last week, but he's on this week as well. So I'm excited about that as well.
I'm excited about it. Man, Matt, welcome, Matt.
As you'll find out, you know my twin sister, and then you'll know my brother. You'll see that really I am the best looking one out of the bunch.
I can imagine. When I look at you, I don't think it's one of those things where how can you get better, right? How can you improve a product?
I'm not boasting, but it is what it is.
You have to call it like we see it, and we all agree it's anonymous, right? Or amphibious. Everybody.
At my cousin's wedding a few weeks ago in Atlanta, I tell everybody that this was my twin sister, and they're like, "You're twins? She looks way younger than you do." Like, come on. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. Well, it's good to have Matt. It's good to have all of you this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover and an hour to cover it up, to cover it in. So don't forget, we have Celebrate Your Faith at night. That's kind of just a couple of events that we have. This is September 4th. Guys, this is like a football game, right? Or a baseball game. It looks like a sports event. Oh, yeah, there's a guy with a bat. So if you're a sports person, come celebrate your faith. Tickets at Water's Edge Frisco. Bring your family. Also, big deal. We are shooting for 100 men. We're praying about that. We have our fall retreat. If you have not made plans for it, this is a time to book it, and let's get you on the roster to join us. It's life changing, and I think each year it's gotten better and better. So we look forward to it. If you know somebody that would be interested in this, let them know. As always, with all the events that we have, please do not let the cost of it, if that is a deterrent, please don't be afraid to let me know. Nobody else is going to know. No one has to know if you don't want that way. Although I encourage you to be open, honest, and vulnerable about it, because there are a lot of brothers that do have that ability and have invested and given generously so that we have a lot of scholarships if that's the case. So please if you know somebody that would love to go, this is
Hey,
an
Obie,
opportunity to. Yeah,
who do we send the money to? Do we just send it like to the MLC
yeah,
or
just yeah
okay?
to the MLC, and then just make sure you put on the registration. No tax, 199 flat. Okay, we're gonna
Got
have
it.
the big keynote speaker, William Graham Tullian Chavidian. I've been practicing, guys, and he has a wonderful hero's journey that is riddled with failure, that is riddled with walking through the valley, but also a story about redemption. And we're really happy that we are able to have him as our keynote speaker. We're also going to have a comedian, Benja, really good guy. Spoken to him, keep in touch with him. And if you have not signed up for we're also going to have our team smoking the good stuff. We have a barbecue team. And if you'd like to join that and be a part of that, please let me know. You can shoot me an email at Obie at the MLC Live. Something before we get started here, we are on the cusp of having our website revamp. It is going to be epic. There's been a lot of work and testing going towards that, and we're excited to see that to you. It's almost here. We just got to work out a few kinks. We want to make sure that it's working when we roll it out and we let the whole world know that they can join us. So, with that being said, we're going to get started right into our series, Brothers in Babylon, where we've been talking about going over the book of Daniel. And if you guys remember last week, I wasn't with you last week, but does anybody remember what we talked about last week? Who it was about? Okay, I see everybody's blowing me up at the
Nebuchadnezzar.
same time. Yep, Nebuchadnezzar. JB, what happened with him?
He got a little bit of an ego about himself and kind of, he kind of believed and kind of didn't believe and kind of listened, but it was at the end, it's kind of all about him,
Now, if you recall, he was wandering around his patio, his porch up there, his deck, and he was looking at everything, and he said, "Man, look what all I've made." And so, what did God do? This is great.
Made him a crazy person.
Yeah. So he said that he would do what he said he was going to do, right? Remember, he had told him that God was going to humble him, and he did. And so, just to kind of keep going with that, I just want to give you a kind of like a kind of like a summary again, because there might be somebody here that wasn't here last week or hasn't been here. It might be somebody's first time. There's four main themes in the book of Daniel that we have to kind of remember, that God is in control and governs all the history for the benefit of his people. And yes, that still applies today. It especially applies today because, it's almost election time. And unfortunately, that really does seem to bring the worst in people, especially some of the believers in Christ that believe that Jesus would be part of their political affiliation. And I'm just here to tell you guys, spoiler alert, that he doesn't. He represents himself and his kingdom. So he's still in control of that, regardless of who becomes president or who is in charge or who are the rulers. He's still on the throne, fully aware of what's happening, and fully using all those situations for his glory and our good. Okay. It also is a key guide on how to be faithful to God's word as a believer living in a hostile pagan culture. That doesn't. I know that's not familiar. That doesn't. We can't relate to that at all here in the good old U.S. of A. But if it were, you guys know that this would be something that the book of Daniel would be relevant to. Also, how believers are to winsomely deal with governing authorities of a hostile pagan culture, winsomely keeping both the first and the fourth commandments. I really like the winsomely part. I tend to be a little more crass about it because I really do think that some believers tend to kind of get more into the butthead realm, which, you're never going to win somebody being a butthead. I'm just telling you that. I've never met anybody that when I'm talking about their conversion that said, I was having a really bad day. I was down on my luck, and then somebody was a butthead to me. That was a believer, and that opened my eyes to the ways of the Lord and His loving kindness. And because of that, here I am today. So hasn't happened yet. Probably won't. And then four of all that God gives to His people, so that they can serve Him in their neighbor in the midst of a pagan and hostile culture. Dana and his brothers in Babylon are not only surviving but thriving in captivity. So we're not just commanded to. God doesn't just put us in a situation where we can just barely eke on by. He puts us in situations where even in the midst of adversity and persecution, we are thriving. Joy is present. Okay, so keeping those things in mind. We talked about how the book of Daniel, there's chapters that get sandwiched together and that go together. So chapter 4 and chapter 5, if you remember last week on the madness of Nebuchadnezzar, he gets turned into a beast and he eats from the grass, sleeping outside. His nails are long and he's gross looking. And so chapter 5, what we're going to be over now, is kind of like the writing of Belshazzar's wall. So they go together, they go together hand in hand to reveal how prideful human kingdoms have rebelled against God and have become beastly. All right. So far, everybody good? A little background on chapter 5. So the year's now been 539 BC, nearly 70 years had passed as Daniel and his three friends were brought into chains to Babylon. If you remember, God used Babylon to bring judgment on his people. And so they got taken to the exile. And if you guys remember, even through his judgment, God told him, "Hey, listen, if you willingly come with them, you will survive, you will do well, right?" But even with that, some people still said, "You know, God, we know better than you, so we'll just stick around and not follow what you do," and it went really badly for them. Spoiler. So right around this time, Daniel is about 80 years old. Nebuchadnezzar has died, and he's now been dead for about 23, 25 years. And his spoiled and entitled and prideful grandson was now the king of Babylon. Now, I took notes over here because there's a lot to unpack as far as who was who, and there's a lot of a lot of weird names, a lot that happens between that time and how we get to King Belshazzar. So the powerful army of the Medes and the Persians are less than 50 miles away, kind of waiting, really kind of waiting for something to happen so that they can kind of get the upper hand, right? So right around that time when Nebuchadnezzar died, Nebuchadnezzar, his son Evil, he's known as Evil Merodach, kind of took over and ruled for about 2 years. And he was assassinated by his brother-in-law, Neriglissar, because he didn't like the way he was ruling. He thought it was, licentious. So Neriglissar ruled for about 4 years, and then he died a natural death. I don't know what a natural death was back in the day. I'm assuming he probably also got stabbed or choked or something. His son Labora Sarkad, he was an only child and of diminished mental capacity, ruled about 9 months, and he was beaten to death by a gang of conspirators. So nice. So then they appointed Nabonidus, one of their gangs, to be king, and he ruled until Cyrus the Persian conquered Babylon. So Belteshazzar the king comes into play here because right around this time, this Nabonidus was off fighting, and while he was out there fighting, Belshazzar came into power. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue here. Okay, so when we hear about the phrase like father like son, how do you guys think about about that and being in relation with Nebuchadnezzar and his son and his grandson? Like father like son. What does that make y'all think about? Yeah, I see everybody's trying to blow up at the same time. Let me unmute y'all because so one of the things I like to point out, and it's really weird how the Bible always mentions like third and fourth generations, right? And a matter of fact, if you go back and read the 10 Commandments, the first commandment where God is telling people, hey, don't have any other gods before me. I'm a jealous God. I lay the sins of the father into the first, second, third, and even to the fourth generation. And so you see evil, you see this perpetual depravity being passed down from father to son, where you have father instilling these values into his son and then his grandson, and then it's this ever it's just a perpetual cycle, this cycle that keeps going, right? So do you guys think that Nebuchadnezzar did a good job, you know raising up his kids and his grandkids? The answer is no, right? He did not, because these guys are doing exactly what their fathers did. And he should say something to us. It really speaks to me as a father that what we do, it really does, you know, gets passed down, right? As as a father, as fathers, we no longer have the luxury to sin and not affect anybody else. There's always this collateral damage that happens when we live in our own way. And this is what happens here. So, why are the key concepts of accountability, mentoring, and discipling so important to those of us who are fathers? Why is that? Right? Because,
Affect-
yeah, go ahead, somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it affects the next generation and the following generations after that.
Yeah. And you see it, right? And this is why we work so hard with the MLC to train and equip the generation that's coming up, that's raising another generation, to instill these values in them, and to lay a foundation that is rooted in Christ, so that continues. And that is why we invest time as older mentors into the younger generation that's going to be raising those children. That's why I work so hard to instill values and to point my kids towards Christ. That really is my first ministry at home. And my wife take that very serious, because our kids now more than ever are bombarded by society and the world. That's constantly going to be telling them who they should be, who they are, right? And it's not and it's not anything that's pleasing to the Lord. It's very egocentric, and it just says something. Hey, and we see it all over social media. You are enough. You are the best. You are king. You make your own rules. You do you. You do what's best for you. You find your own way. And those all sound fine and dandy, but man, I'll tell you guys, I'm a crappy God. I really am. I'm not a good God, and I don't want to be in charge of my own life. I want to be submissive to something out there that's bigger, that's eternal, that's better, that's going to last forever. And that's the legacy that I want to leave my son, and definitely not the legacy that Nebuchadnezzar left. So, if somebody can help read, we're going to read here. This is from Daniel 5, 1 through 6. If somebody can help me here. Hey, Jay, can you read this?
Yes, I can. The writing on the wall. King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While that guy was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in gold and silver goblets that Ezra, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them.
So we have this army out there that's ready to pounce on them, that's waiting around for them, right? And what are these guys doing? They're so overconfident in their own greatness that they're not only going to have a party, but they're going to defy and mock the God of Abraham and the God of Abraham and Jacob, right? So he brings out these goblets that have been taken from Jerusalem, And this is an act of defiance. This is man's depravity, men saying, hey, we don't care what he did. That means nothing to us. All right. So these guys are overconfident in their own ability, not wise at all, and then they're drinking and mocking God. So here we go. This is where things get escalated. Hey, Richard, are you able to read this?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
As they drink the wine, they praise the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking.
I don't blame him. I'm just going to tell you guys out there that I don't blame it as a believer. Even if I saw a hand coming out on the writing on the wall, I would really question a lot of things, and I would be frightened none the least. So, as I said before, what are some key problematic issues with this feast? So, we have these guys that are celebrating in the midst of a siege, and then they are using these vessels from Israel's temples. That's a slap in the face to God, right? Even though, even and it's not like they don't know what has happened, right? Because they have seen the God of Abraham and Jacob reveal things to Daniel. And not only that, what did they just watch a few years ago that happened with the three friends? You remember their names? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You guys remember what happened? Well, I will tell you, if somebody got thrown into the fire and they didn't burn up and saw the Son of Man, Jesus incarnate, or Jesus in the midst of them dancing with them, I think that would be a pretty memorable thing as somebody that was up in the royal line, right? Hey, you remember that time my grandfather threw these guys and the God of Abraham delivered them, these guys that we had captive? Yeah. So they mocked God and their pride, man, it's this thing that intoxicated them and really deceived them that they are the greatest thing ever. All right. So when we say the writing on the wall, the writing is on the wall. What does that mean? Does anybody know?
Means it's kind of foretold, like this is what's going to happen, or this is what's fixing it to happen.
Isn't that great that it comes from here? I think so. So here we go. The king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. Then he said to these wise men of Babylon. So who are they calling again? We've seen that we've had this track record of these guys that really offer no value other than yes man. I'm going to say, right? So they called him again, and then he said to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Do you guys know why he's saying the third highest ruler in the kingdom? So you guys remember I told you about Nabonidus? So what I think is happening here is that he is the kind of like the man behind the scenes, and then Belshazzar's second in command. So he obviously can't make him the second greatest, right? So that's why he makes him the third, because there was somebody else in power that was his father. Okay, so that's why we see them say that he's the third person, the third in command. Okay, then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what he meant. And this is what I think crazy and amazing is that it wasn't like this guy that just had a dream where he's like, "Hey, I just had this crazy dream," or this happened to me. Everybody saw the writing on the wall. Everybody saw this. So it wasn't something like that could be put up for interpretation or hearsay. There are a lot of people, there were a lot of witnesses that saw this happening, and they were all freaked out as well. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. So the queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. And she says, "May the king live forever." Again, we all know that cannot happen, right? Kings don't live forever. Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. So, again, we have them, at this time, Daniel is not like a young spry anymore. He's old. More than likely, he probably had still a position of power and authority, but was removed from them. So really, they more than likely they probably put him away. We're tired of hearing about your God, but now we need somebody to tell us this, and we remember that Daniel had the wisdom of the gods. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought from Judah? I've heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. The wise men and enchanters were brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. Now I have heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made third highest ruler in the kingdom." That's a pretty nice little offer, right? So how is Daniel different described? How is Daniel different? How's he described in a way that's different than the men of Babylon?
He has a resume for being able to do these things rather than just reading signs. He's kind of known. Well, I mean, not he's known by some people as handling these difficult things.
Yeah. And one thing to note is that they do mention that he has the wisdom of the gods, right? So they know that there's something that sets him apart from all the other men of Babylon. So who in our day would qualify as the wise men of our Babylon, guys? That's a good question, I think. Who do you guys think?
I feel like the media seems to try to be that role.
Okay, that's a good one. All right. Could be some of, I don't know, maybe religious leaders, maybe political leaders, right? As well. So, Rick, that's a good one. Love it. All right. And who in our day would qualify as Daniel in the midst of Babylon? Ah,
Wouldn't it be all of us trying to stay the
I
course?
would hope so.
Yeah.
So yeah. So practically speaking, how do we become like Daniel and make it a habit to seek wisdom from above rather than earthly wisdom? Right? How do we do this? How do we how do we become like Daniel? How do we instill in us these habits?
Obie, one thing that I do or try to do is talk about Jesus every day to someone, or at least share what my perception, even in the days that suck, my perception of the things that are around me that are the glories of God, because they're always there. You just have to be looking for them. And
Mm-hmm.
even in the middle of the suck that we talk about, there's still boundless glory. There's still boundless glory all around, and his blessings and and all of that.
Yeah. So you're telling me that sharing God's word with other people and encouragement also does something for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I know what that does for me.
yeah.
I was very, very fortunate to have a dad that I worked with every day. Came home and worked in the family business. My dad was always a big encourager. Even, even, sorry, even when I failed. He allowed me to do that, which obviously we know in those failures is where we learn the most. And my dad's had his own struggles, but one of the greatest Christian men that I know. And so in that, just trying to, if you see God daily and try to talk about him, the wisdom, the things when you talk about him, the things coming out of your mouth are not of you, they're of him. And that's not only good for you, but it may be good for someone else as well.
Yeah. Isn't that refreshing and comforting to know that even in the midst of our imperfections, God is actively still working through us, right? What a beautiful thing, especially hearing you say that, hey, even when my dad made mistakes, there's something that God used in all of this for his glory and my good. And I can tell you that is something that I can speak to as well because my dad, the same thing that happened with my dad. My dad had a lot of shortcomings, but he pointed us towards Christ. And in the end, he even in his last words that he said to me were don't forget about Christ. And so in the end, grace and mercy wins, and God uses imperfect people in us to bring others to know him. And again, one of the ways that he uses is through ministries and groups like what we have today, the MLC, because as we're joining together, we get to really spur one another and encourage one another and press one another towards Christ, and we grow, right? There is on Tuesdays, if you guys don't know, we get together, me and Jay and our brother Malcolm, and we kind of go over the Bible. If you guys or don't want to know more about the Bible and more, the basics of the Bible, who wrote it, all of that, we do this every every Tuesday night at 7, and we just go over the Bible and we go over, and what's happening is that as we're teaching, we are also learning, and it is such a beautiful thing to see not only growth in Jay, but to see growth in me and Malcolm as we are teaching, as we are going over scriptures. God's revealing things to us even as we teach. So I encourage you guys, if you guys aren't doing anything, hit me up. I'll send you the link and we can do that. But that is seeking wisdom, right? From the one that gives wisdom freely when we ask, the one that knows everything. So I'm going to continue reading. Richard, can you continue helping me here?
Yeah, for sure. Then Daniel answered the king, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the nations and peoples of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted. And those he wanted to humble, he humbled."
So he's telling him, hey, everything that you have, it is because of God. And I just love how I think Daniel's reached this age here where, not that he wasn't before, he was always really bold, but man, it's this new level of boldness and really just being growing older and wiser where he tells him, hey, you can keep your gifts to yourself. You can give the rewards to somebody else. I really don't care about that because Daniel, it really wasn't defined by positions. It wasn't something that could sway him, that appealed to him, right? And he tells him, keep all of that. It doesn't matter to me, but I will tell you what the Most High God says about this. All right, go ahead.
All right. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys and he ate grass like the ox. and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes.
And here we go. It's going to get tough.
But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription.
Those are not easy things to say to a king. I will tell you that from history and from reading some of the other books of the Bible, you'll find out that a lot of times speaking the truth is very costly. Nevertheless, Daniel knew who his God was. He knew who he was in God, and so he was emboldened and confident to be able to speak truth to the king. So, what are the two sins which Daniel charges Belteshazzar with? Go back here.
Because
All right.
he did not acknowledge God and what he's done, and
Okay.
where he got his power from.
So pride. Okay. What else? Somebody else?
He drank from the goblets.
Mock
Mock
God.
God, yeah.
Openly God mock God. You know,
bet.
I love what you say about sweeping things under the rug, because that is something that even as a man, we are kind of condition ourselves to do things and really hide our failures. And I don't think that's something that society really promotes, right? We kind of keep things to ourselves, deal with it on your own, and it's really toxic. It's very destructive. And Jay, a personal account on that is, it's so insightful because we see what happened. God wants us to do the total opposite of that. To come forward and say, "Listen, guys, this is what's happened in my life. This is something that was destructive that I took a part of, and this is how it turned out. And here's my heart." And God begins to use that, even which was meant for destruction. And now Jay's sitting here in front of all of you guys, sharing with that, in the hopes that somebody's going to hear that, and it's going to stir within them something that's going to allow them to come forward and be open, honest, and vulnerable. And God's going to begin using that to change somebody's life. So thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. We all appreciate that. I never get tired of hearing that, as painful as that is.
Well, it's my story, and you got to tell your stories. And because not only, the vulnerability, we've been taught the vulnerability is weakness, and that's such a lie. Because if vulnerability is weakness, then shame has complete power over us.
Mhm.
So if we are vulnerable and we tell our story, yeah, I'm not proud of it. But you know what? I think God expects us to tell our story in hopes that it will help someone else, like you just said. And so once you realize that vulnerability, as a man, vulnerability is probably one of the most powerful things that you can have.
And I hope you guys hear that. I hope that resonates with you, man, this morning. Say that again, Jay. What is that? What did you say? Vulnerability. Say that again, because I think
Oh,
people need to hear that again.
vulnerability is truly power. If you're not vulnerable, then sin can take complete control, or shame can take complete control over you. Brene Brown she did a TED talk. It's Brene Brown, and she studied vulnerability and shame. And boy, once you understand the correlation between the two, and that vulnerability is truly a power, it will completely change your mindset. It's unbelievable. But if you get a chance, listen to her TED talk, because we did it in some advanced leadership stuff, and wow, I mean, it was life changing, because it talks about the power of vulnerability. And we're too proud. We let pride not show us, or not allow us to see that vulnerability is a power.
Yeah, and I can definitely attest to that. As Latino, you guys know that, I mean, the Latino culture is really toxic when it comes to vulnerability, and when it comes to that, because men don't show their emotions, men don't cry, men don't, you're a sissy if you show your weakness, you bottle it all up inside, and then eventually what ends up happening is you know, it turns into something more destructive, right? And so you have all these men that drink themselves, it's alcoholism is really huge in the Latino culture. you know you don't cry about it, you get drunk about it and then cry about it, and then it does nothing. And so that's why I'm passionate about the MLCs, because I get to really fight back against that machismo that says you got it, you can do it on your own. And we stand here and speak truth and are open, honest, and vulnerable, and then that's how lives are transformed. That's how God begins to work with you. Really, God cannot work with God. Well, let me say this: God will not work with somebody that will not allow him to, that will not humble himself. He just won't, right? Because ultimately, and we see this here in Daniel, right? God does not, God will not let anybody else take the glory. He does not share his glory with anybody else. And you see it here. You see it in the Bible over and over again. He always works things in a way that brings honor and glory to his name, nobody else. Right? And you just saw it happen here. Okay. Anybody else have anything? I'd love to hear from somebody. This is a safe place to do that, guys. Okay.
Hey, I just wanted to add in to what Jay was saying, and how much that idea, because we always talk about figure out strategies, and we try to fortify where we need to fortify. And the idea that I'm finally doing something for me, that was the hook. That sounds like that's where the devil got in there. And man, that is so dangerous, and such a that like that's I think that's how he would get me. In the fact that, because when you try, and so many of us do, we want to be servant leaders, we want to be servants in everything we do, and then the devil kind of creeps in. Well, what about you? Well, what about you? What are you going to do? What's this for you? And man, Jay, I really appreciate that openness, and that is going to help fortify so many of us, because when we hear the devil saying that, when that thought pops into your head, well, what about me? We can now say, well, is that really for you? Let's think this out. Let's go through that long process and see where the end result really is. And brother, man, thank you so much for sharing your story. That is helping so many of us, especially me. I see that as an attack, and thank you for being open about it.
Well, and I will say this, I appreciate that very much, because I don't do it for the glory of me by any means. I'd rather crawl under a table than tell my story. But this group has provided for so many of us the reality that, you know what, we're all left up. Just some of us know it, and this group knows that we're all that way, and we love each other through it. And the power that comes from that, the devil hates. He hates vulnerability. He wants you to live in shame, and this, being a part of this group, doesn't allow that to happen.
Love it, man. Amen. So, I mean, I want to read to y'all a little bit. This kind of goes hand in hand with what Jay was saying from James 1:13 through 15. This is from the New Living Translation. It says, "And remember, when you're being tempted, do not say, 'God is tempting me.' God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. I mean, Jay, we couldn't have planned this better if we tried, you know?
We didn't plan it, did we?
No. So you have this, and when I talk to my kids about this, I always like to use the analogy of the pet tiger, right? You get this temptation, you get this pet tiger that's so cute. It's this little baby pet tiger that you get, and it's like a cub, and it's so cute and cuddly. And before you know it, it begins to grow quickly, and then one thing leads to another, and it eats you from with a smile on its face from your feet up. So, and it hurts the entire time you're dying. And so this is what happens, right? This is what James is talking about. These desires, these temptations, they come from our own desires and they entice us and then they drag us away. It's a really graphic image that you have here, dragging you away, and then they give birth to sinful actions. And when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. And we see it over and over in the Bible. So the verdict is in, guys. Belteshazzar abused, he misused, he disrespected, mocked the talents, resources, leaderships that God had bestowed upon him to save others. Right? He mocked that. He made fun of, made light of. So now I'm going to ask you guys, what talents has God given you? Where are you using them to glorify by serving others? What resources has God given you? Where are you, and could you use them to glorify God by serving others? So, we have these guys, Daniel. We have Daniel that is using the abilities that God gave him, the wisdom that God gave him for his glory. So, I mean, I'm speaking to us today. God's speaking to us today and asking us, what talents has God given us? God didn't just give you aptitudes and abilities and talents so that you could make much of yourself. I believe with all my heart, He gave us all the time, the resources, the talents for His glory so that we may His name known across the world so that other peoples may come to know Him. So, oh man, as we said before, Daniel told Belteshazzar that things were going to be bad for him. And so this is the inscription that was written. And this is how I've always read it in Spanish. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. And this is what these words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Not will, right? In the future, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians, these guys that were outside of their walls waiting on him. Then, at Belteshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple. A gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. And that very night, Belteshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. So, very traumatic series of events here. So this is an anonymous leadership bomb that says pride will cost you everything and leave you with nothing. Really, it's based on the Proverbs 16:18 that says pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride comes before fall. We've all heard it said that, but it's in reference to that. And man, how relevant is that to what had just happened to Belteshazzar? So, do you guys remember, Jeff? I'm going to ask you this. Do you remember another time where we were seeing the finger of God writing something important?
Oh yeah. Well, the one that comes to mind for me is when Jesus kneels down and starts writing in the sand when everybody was ready to kill the woman who had been caught in adultery.
Yeah.
So everybody is, he's sitting there and they're all questioning and they're getting ready and they're getting hyped up. And so, of course it's a trap for Jesus. And then this poor lady is, I mean, obviously she's a sinner. She's made mistakes. Nobody ever denies that, but they're getting ready to take her out. And then Jesus kneels down while he's listening to him and just starts kind of drawing in the sand or writing in the sand. And I don't know, there's no actual scriptural backing for this, for my theory there, but I've always assumed that he's writing some of their sins, some of the sins of the people around them in that sand and letting them see. And that's probably why they started dropping off one by one and walking away.
Love it. Yeah. Somebody else also wrote the 10 Commandments also as well. So 3 instances on here that we got. How great is that, right? So what does the finger of God indicate? Jeff, you're on here on now, so maybe take.
What does the finger of God indicate?
Yeah.
Sum that up. I would say that there is a reckoning coming, or there is a checking or a reality check coming. Whenever you see that God is writing or Jesus is writing, there is a truth that's about to be revealed, and everyone there that's reading it is probably not going to be aligned with that truth.
Yeah. So, in closing, guys, what's one key takeaway that you got out of Daniel chapter 5? Somebody?
God is still in charge.
Hey, he still is. He is still in charge. Absolutely. Everywhere we look, even when it appears that the Babylonians are in charge, right? So we have to remember, guys, the days of wickedness, man, they're short. They are in the scope of eternity. They don't even register on the Richter scale, right? They don't. And so that's where our hope is in Christ, right? That even though things may seem bleak, even though things may seem like they're hopeless, there is a reckoning coming. There is a judgment coming when the sky's going to crack open. King Jesus is going to ride through the heavens and come back in all his might and all his glory. And that's where our hope is. And Daniel was fully aware of that. So I want to be respectful to everybody's time. We're going to pray, and then I would love for it if we stayed a little bit after the after party, if we want to talk, or if you have any insights or comments into what we talked about today. God, thank you so much for your word that it never changes. Thank you because you are true to what you say. Thank you because you reveal things to us through your word. And we plead with you and we ask you that you allow us to not just be readers and hearers of your word, but to be people that are transformed by it, people that are marked by the love that we have for you and for each other. Use us, allow us to use all the resources and talents that we have for your glory, not to make a mockery of you, but to make your name renowned, so that others may come to know the fullness of your love. Thank you for everyone that's here. Ask you that you will stir our affection towards you, that you will allow us to be open, honest, and vulnerable about the state of our heart, so that we may grow in the fullness of your love and the love for one another. And it's in the precious name of your Son, Jesus, that we ask all of these things. Amen.
Thanks for joining and listening. We hope that you were truly blessed. Now, you can join the live call every Friday morning at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, and please bring a friend. And to learn more about the MLC, visit our website at themlc.life. That's themlc.life. Have a great day.